Your weekly news roundup on everything happening in Battlefield 5. Possible XP boosters coming with or after the upcoming rank update, accidental dice leaks on the upcoming weapons and gadgets for Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, more collector skins in the armory, and the danger of violent video games. This is your week on the Battlefield. Welcome to this episode of This Week on the Battlefield, the show where we cover news, updates, the community, and so much more, all around the Battlefield franchise. As per usual, there's much to cover, so let's jump straight into it. This week saw the introduction of the second of the Marita-focused playlists, switching from the previous Breakthrough Conquest to now a Frontlines domination model. So for those who are fans of Frontlines, definitely make sure you check out this playlist before it disappears. Also this week we got an armory update, bringing us two further versions of the collector skins, in this case for the MP40 and the KE7. I point this out specifically because, actually in my opinion, the collector skins are one of the few series of skins that are actually worth purchasing with company coin. The rest are either just bad or require you to use a premium currency, so snag them while at home. We also got update 4.2.2 this week, addressing some of the instances of crashing across all platforms and a practice range crash bug which happened when interacting with planes. Other than that, there's been no major updates or leaks regarding future patches for the game. What is known is that the last patch of August likely will be a relatively large one, as teased by some of the developers so far. Also in this week's news, we have Tides of War Chapter 4 Week 7, Elevated Aggression, of course with the reward of a waterproof epic skin for the M30 drilling. Speaking of those skins, next week's reward is also going to be cosmetic sadly in nature, with it being the Fallgrün Panzer 38T skin, something out there for the enthusiastic tank drivers. Also what to expect next week, we have the screenshot competition that I reported on last week and was actually supposed to begin last week. That sadly never materialized, but we have been informed that it should be announced this Monday. Take that with the usual dice level grain of salt, however. Also in somewhat soon, but not necessarily next week news, expect Gamescom information on the near future regarding the release of both the Provence and Lofton Island maps, those relatively small, more infantry focused maps that were teased earlier at EA Play. Then lastly, in what to come soon, we may be getting our first snippets of what to expect from update 4.4, that relatively large August update, next week, as indicated by some of the developers and of course in the weekly posts from the community managers. In the Soon TM category of news, which is anywhere from tomorrow to never, we have been informed that there is a very likely possibility that we will see the introduction of 2x XP boosters after the progression update 4.4 comes, which is at the end of August. That's update 4.4 if they stick to their actual initial schedule. Also, we had an accidental weapon leak this week, not in the sense of which weapons to expect in the near future, but actually how they look, as the art station of EA DICE released a couple of renders from weapons that aren't actually in the game yet, all but confirming not only that they are coming, but also how they look. In total, there is 1 primary, 1 secondary, and 4 gadgets, with the respective primary being the already announced well gun, and the respective secondary being the suppressed PPK. In forms of the gadgets, we have the Fliegerfaust B version, which is an anti-air gadget, the Einstoß Flammenwerfer 46, a German flamethrower, the M2 flamethrower from the Americans, and the Haftholladung magnetic mine, expected to work in-game at least similar to the Limpet charge. If you want more detail on the history and possible functioning of all these weapons and gadgets, I recommend you check out one of Danny's or Weiste's video. I have them linked down below in the description, where they covered in a little bit more detail what was released in form of these screenshots. Over in community news this week, we have an iteration of focused feedback on Rush featuring Matt Kenturak, one of the level designers over at DICE, who recently worked on some of the improvements we saw come to Rush, which were overall relatively well received. Now, the community position on Rush as temporary game mode, having it on more maps, and the consequences of unevenly balanced teams being relatively drastic on a linear focused game mode are well known to DICE, and they've stated that they're exploring and discussing objects to address them. But if you have any other feedback other than that, or would just simply like to interact with the developers on Rush specifically, feel free to check out the link down below in the description, where you'll have the full feedback forum where you can get into contact and get into a discussion possibly with Matt Kenturak on the subject matter. Then, of course, this week in community relevant news, we had the violent natures of video games showing up in the news, in connection, of course, with the recent horrible shootings over in the USA. Now, Relatively simply put, the community hasn't reacted well to this, as the gaming community as a whole is relatively aware that countless studies have proven that there's actually no causal link between video games and violent or antisocial behavior, and really, with a bit of common sense, you will do just fine to dispel this argument, because if we're honest, guess what, large parts of the world do actually have video games, but most of the world doesn't have mass shootings the same way the USA has. That to one side, it had to be mentioned, because it was part of the discussion in the community this week. But with that, over on to our only in Battlefield moments. And we start off this week with Brooks Big Booty playing on Marita, frontline specifically clearing the B flag with his M97 trench gun. He actually manages to get 11 enemies in just under 30 seconds, putting out some solid on-objective work for his team. Dramatic Hoover up next with this amazing shot. Then we have Too Good For You Mate, making surprisingly effective use of the AP Mines gadget for the Panzer 38T tank, something I haven't actually ever seen used to this effectiveness, pushing the point for his team and taking out a bunch of enemies while doing so. And lastly, we have the War Shadow 110, taking the V from victory from the bleeding out screen over in Firestorm for his team. But with that coming to the end of this week's episode, if you enjoyed the show, found it interesting or entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share, and of course hit me up with your feedback, suggestions, and opinions down below in the comments or over on Twitter. With that being said, however, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next episode of This Week on the Battlefield.